Welcome back to Liberty Bytes on the Think Liberty Network. I'm your host, William Gadsden. You can follow me personally on Twitter at William_Gadsden, or check out my Facebook page at William Gadsden, Political Commentator. Check out Think Liberty on Facebook, Twitter, or whatever your favorite social media outlet is. Give us a follow and a like for updates on new episodes and more. All right, so we're going to talk about New Zealand, specifically the mosque shootings. But before we get to that, I want to get to a few other things, kind of get them out of the way here. Now, being a Christian, I have to keep in the forefront of my mind that 50 people were killed, and those 50 people were all made in the image of God. They were fearfully and wonderfully made. So regardless of whatever other factors some people may point to in order to try to minimize the level of tragedy that took place, and there are those people out there, I think it's important to at least keep that in mind. I think even the most hardened of atheists can agree that the loss of life here was horrible, and it is something that should never be repeated. But the other thing that I have to get past real quick are the different terms that are already being thrown around in the media regarding the firearms in particular. Things like high-powered rifle, assault weapon, assault rifle, and high-capacity magazines get thrown around in 9 out of 10 articles. So real quick, every firearm is high-powered. That buzzword doesn't actually mean anything. There's no definition of assault weapon. This, too, is a meaningless buzzword. Assault rifle does have a definition, and using that definition, those types of firearms are banned from civilian use in every first-world country in the world, including the United States. Finally, whenever the left refers to high-capacity magazines, they're referring to standard capacity magazines. A 30-round mag for an AR-15 is a standard magazine size for that weapon. A 10, 15, or 17-round magazine for a handgun is the standard mag size for different models of handguns. Those are all standard cap mags. If you want an example of a high-capacity magazine, they are out there. I personally love my 100-round magazine for my AR-15, but to call the magazines that come with these firearms high capacity is both grossly inaccurate and almost unbelievably disingenuous. At least it would be unbelievable if it wasn't coming from the left, but at this point it's just expected. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of this whole debacle. We all know what happened. A lone wolf attacked 2 mosques in Christchurch, New Zealand, with multiple firearms, and live-streamed the whole thing on social media. He also released a manifesto explaining his ideology and why he was doing it. But exploring the aftermath of this horrible tragedy is when we find the most interesting and puzzling aspects. Let's start with the shooter himself. We know he practically lived on the online message boards 4chan and 8chan, famous or infamous depending on your point of view, for the depths of its conspiracy theories, edgy jokes, and collaboration for real-world trolling. We know that he encouraged people to subscribe to PewDiePie on his live stream before he started shooting. And we know that he flashed the OK symbol in one of his first appearances after the shooting, a long-known but widely ignored trolling technique to create a racism hoax that was started on 4chan. Then take a look at the manifesto itself. It's a bizarre mix of ethnocentrism, militant environmentalism, and weirdly enough, praising communist China for its totalitarian society. All indicators point to this being the actions of a very disturbed individual with a strange obsession for trolling, to the point where it is taken to the extreme and the absurd. Nothing that comes from that individual can or should be taken seriously. And yet, here we are. But let's move on to the country of New Zealand itself. This is a country with a population of about 5 million people, with an estimated number of about 1.5 million firearms. Their gun control laws before the shooting were already highly restrictive. In order to even own a firearm of any kind, required the issuing of a permit from the government. Different kinds of firearms required different levels of permits, and in order to receive a permit at all, you had to have what the government deemed to be a valid reason for owning a firearm. Oh, and self-defense is not considered a valid reason for ownership. Think about that, especially in the light of this massacre. Within days of the shooting, the Prime Minister was already calling for the implementation of more strict gun laws. Within 2 weeks, semi-automatics were banned from being sold with a quote-unquote buyback, which is actually just a required turn-in, and the government gives you a few bucks for your trouble in the works. And of course, we already have members of the authoritarian left calling for the U.S. to do the same thing in the wake of the shooting, as if U.S. gun laws had anything to do with what happened in a tiny, peaceful country on the other side of the world. So, literally 2 weeks after the shooting, the government of New Zealand passes sweeping new gun laws. Because in New Zealand, owning a firearm of any kind is a privilege, not a right. Within 2 weeks. So here's where we get to our main point here. Taking a look at every single facet of our government in the U.S., especially the system put in place for the creation and destruction of laws, we're talking about ranging from the Constitution itself to using factionalism, even to the numbers of senators per state compared to the representatives of each state. Hell, the term lengths of senators and representatives, going through the Supreme Court, everything being signed or vetoed by the president. Each and every step was designed the way it was specifically by the Founding Fathers to make it incredibly difficult to create new laws. The Federalist Papers themselves give us a glimpse into the minds of the Founding Fathers, in which they make it clear that they were wary of the people being swayed by events in life, both tragic and advantageous, that might push them to demand new laws, to demand that their government act immediately on this thing or that. The Founding Fathers wanted to make it hard to create new laws, make it take a long time, so that we wouldn't be tempted to rush into place reactionary legislation like other countries do, like New Zealand has now done. So in light of that, I invite you to take a step back and take a look at the big picture here, and to thank whatever power you hold in your heart that we live in a country that was built on the idea of critical, thorough thought and debate when it comes to creating the laws that guide us as citizens. Because the only thing worse than a tragedy like the shooting in New Zealand is compounding that tragedy with reactionary legislation that will do nothing but further disarm innocent people like those that were killed. Thanks for listening, and I hope you'll join me next week to become more liberty-centered with us. I'm William Gadsden with Think Liberty.